Welcome to the Explainer. So think about the very last thing you bought. You probably looked at the price tag, decided, yep, it's worth it, and just made the purchase, right? It's a super simple transaction. I mean, businesses exist to satisfy our needs, and honestly, they do a pretty great job of it. But behind that visible price tag, there's a hidden ledger of costs, a ledger that doesn't just bill the company or the consumer, but one that actually bills all of us. Today, we're going to look really closely at the true cost of business, the environmental impacts, the heavy ethical choices, and how the bottom line, well, kind of complicates the whole shebang. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll uncover the true cost of business activity. Then, we're going to decode a massive economic concept called externalities. Third, we'll map out the path to sustainability. Fourth, we'll look at the forces pressuring businesses to change their ways. And finally, we'll tackle the ethics dilemma. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get right to it. Section 1. The true cost of business, environmental impact. Here's the reality. Every single business activity aimed at satisfying a customer inevitably leaves some kind of mark on our natural world. It's just the unavoidable friction of industry. Let's look at exactly what these marks are. The gloomy side of the ledger that isn't always accounted for by corporate balance sheets. First up, we have pollution. Factory chimneys significantly reduce air quality, and industrial waste products can severely pollute our rivers and seas. Second, global warming. The massive burning of fossil fuels for transport and production, that creates carbon emissions, which leads to a gradual, undeniable increase in the Earth's temperature. And third, resource depletion. When a business uses non-renewable resources, like harvesting timber from ancient rainforests, it leaves less of that natural wealth for future generations. So how exactly does a company choose to respond to all this? Well, what happens when a business actually decides to prioritize, say, green equipment over pure, unadulterated profit? That brings us to the concept of social responsibility. This is when a business makes decisions that benefit stakeholders other than just its shareholders. Now, a shareholder, they just want a financial return on their investment. But a stakeholder is anyone affected by the business, the local community, the workers, and yes, the environment itself. So when a company chooses to invest in expensive green technology to protect the environment, they are actively practicing social responsibility. Moving on to Section 2, externalities, understanding costs. Now, what's really interesting here is the core friction of our entire explainer, externalities. These are the costs, or sometimes the benefits, that society pays for, which businesses keep completely off their official books. Think about it like a split screen. On the private side, if a company builds a new factory, their private costs are the land, the construction materials, and the wages for their workers. Their private benefits, the money they make from sales. Simple enough, right? But what about the external side? The external costs are paid by society. Things like the noise of the factory, the pollution in the air, or the loss of local parkland. However, to be fair, it's not all negative. There are also external benefits to society, like the creation of new local jobs or other businesses moving into the area to support that factory. So, to make sense of all this, economists and governments rely on some exact math. The social cost is calculated by simply adding the private costs to the external costs. And the social benefit, that's the private benefits plus the external benefits. Governments literally use these exact formulas when deciding if a massive new factory or infrastructure project should go ahead. They sit down and calculate, does the total social benefit actually outweigh the total social cost? If yes, the project gets the green light. If no, it gets halted. It is a strict mathematical balancing act of societal well-being. Section 3. The path to sustainability, fixing external costs. So how can companies actually fix these external costs and balance their ledgers? Well, it starts with a rock-solid commitment to sustainable development. This is defined as achieving economic growth without damaging the environment or society for future generations. It's a really critical definition because it establishes that economic growth and environmental care absolutely do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can build, you can grow, and you can profit without stealing from the future. And here are 4 highly actionable methods businesses can use to execute on that promise. Step 1. Use renewable energy. A factory can easily install solar panels or run on wind power. Step 2. Recycle waste. Businesses can reuse materials, like recycling water in the manufacturing process or repurposing grain byproducts. Step 3. Use fewer resources. This is known in the industry as lean production. Basically managing resources as efficiently as possible to minimize waste from the very start. And step 4, develop eco-friendly products. Think of things like biodegradable packaging that seamlessly breaks down without harming nature. These are tangible, proven steps to balance out that environmental ledger. Section 4. Pressuring businesses to change. Forces of change. Now, we've seen the solutions, but let's pose a very realistic question here. What happens when doing the right thing actually hurts the bottom line? Because, let's face it, businesses rarely changed just for the sake of it. One of the absolute most severe external threats pushing back against pure profit is a consumer boycott. This is when groups act together to force businesses to change their policies by entirely refusing to buy their products. Let me tell you, when a company's revenue stream is suddenly shut off by the very people it's trying to sell to, change happens incredibly fast. But a boycott is just one tool. Broadly speaking, there are three main groups that pressure businesses to adopt sustainable practices. First, everyday consumers. If a business is reported for polluting, many everyday shoppers will just stop buying its products, simply to avoid associating with bad publicity. Second, organized pressure groups. Think of organizations like Greenpeace. They act together collectively to force businesses to change policies by leveraging intense media coverage and organizing those consumer boycotts we just talked about. And third, governments. They don't just boycott, they legislate. They can step right in and make certain environmentally destructive activities outright illegal, such as dumping toxic waste directly into rivers. Governments also use some pretty sophisticated financial tools like pollution permits. These are strict financial limits set by governments detailing exactly how much a specific factory is allowed to pollute. If the factory exceeds that limit, boom, they're hit with massive, heavy fines. This is a fascinating mechanism, honestly, because it puts a literal, legal price tag on an external cost. It essentially forces the business to move the cost of pollution from the external society column right back onto their own private balance sheet. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the ethics dilemma. Making moral decisions. So the crucial point is, this leads us to the ultimate battleground for any manager, choosing between doing what is strictly profitable versus doing what is governed by a moral code, doing what is right rather than just what is legally permissible. To really understand business ethics, we have to ground the theory in harsh, real-world choices. Here are some stark examples of unethical behavior that companies navigate. First, offering or taking bribes to secure secret information or lucrative contracts. Second, employing child labor. And keep in mind, a company might do this in a specific country where it technically isn't illegal, yet it obviously remains deeply unethical. Third, fixing high prices with competitors to artificially gouge consumers. And fourth, paying directors massive multi-million-dollar bonuses at the exact same time the company is aggressively reducing its everyday workforce. These are real, heavy choices made every single day in boardrooms all around the world. Let's put this dilemma into an accounting metaphor. Let's look at the balance sheet of ethics. Because being ethical costs money, plain and simple. Under potential limitations, doing the right thing definitely means higher costs, like paying proper adult wages instead of exploiting cheap child labor. Those higher costs can force a business to charge higher prices than its more ruthless rivals. And ultimately, this leads to lower short-term profits, which means less immediate money for the owners. But look at the benefit side of the ledger. In the long run, ethical choices buy incredible good publicity, acting as essentially free promotion. They buy deep, lasting customer loyalty, consumers will actively switch to a brand they trust, and they make recruitment vastly easier because the best workers and top-tier investors actively want to be linked to ethical firms. It is short-term pain for long-term stability and respect. We've unpacked the external costs, the pressure to become sustainable, and the harsh reality of corporate ethics. We know that doing the right thing for the planet and for society almost always costs the business more money, and eventually, those costs trickle right down to the price tag on the shelf. So I want to leave you with this one provocative question to think about the next time you are at the store checking out. Are you, as a consumer, willing to pay the higher prices required for ethical business practices? The true cost of business is paid by someone. The real question is, are we willing to pay our share? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll catch you next time.